welcome back to the Bearded Biker Bible Man. I was talking to my wife about the ideas we have for the channel, and she told me nobody knows who I am. I should tell them a little bit about myself. So I agreed to do that this time. I want to give you a little insight to who I am. I believe that all mankind is broken. We're broken in different ways, and I certainly was a broken man. I was a wretch, and God saved me. Ephesians chapter 2 tells us that we are dead in our trespasses and sin, but God has made us alive together in Him. And so I am the same story as so many other people that I was lost and now I'm found. I was blind and now I see. A couple of years ago, I was working on a dream to finish my Master's of Divinity, or work toward my Master's of Divinity. And as I was doing it, I had several classes I needed to make up. One of them was English. And so in my English course, they asked us to write a descriptive essay, describe something in your life. And so I chose to write a descriptive essay that tells a little bit about my story, about broken man, broken, unfaithful, twisted, and how God made him straight. So I thought I would read it for you all today, and then maybe fill in some of the gaps of the story going along with it. So let me share it with you. It goes like this. Although the days may be long, sometimes the nights are longer. I lie beside my wife and I look at her face, untouched by all the years of torment. The peace I see there is a peace of a good conscience, at rest with her Maker, secure in His arms. And those arms that cradle her in sleep, that wipe away the pain of the day with the promise that tomorrow brings of better things, provides a perfect atmosphere for peaceful sleep. I watch her sleep and remember the day that I killed the spark in her eyes, the day my war with God ended. So how did I become this man, this breaker of dreams, the destroyer of hope? No one simply wakes up one day and says to themselves, today I'm going to ruin someone's life. So as I watch her face, I remember the house where I grew up and the twisted branch on a tree in my backyard. That branch, as it grew, was forced to twist by other elements, different obstacles in its environment. Forced it to twist first one way and then another. Avoiding the wall here, a tree house there, and all the while longing to reach up for the sun, to touch the light. Well, it grew. However, the growth was twisted. So like that branch, I grew longing to touch the sun, but I grew twisted. No one could see the twist because it was within me. A harsh word here, my parents' divorce, anger. My soul longed for the light, but sin twisted within me. She never had a chance. She saw her Marine in dress blues, nothing out of place, straight as an arrow, shoes sparkling black, brass shining like gold, crisp creases, perfect little liar. So 5 years pass like a trembling sigh as a twisted man makes himself known. Unfaithful to his vows, unfaithful to his love, unfaithful to his God, unfaithful to everything that ever mattered in his life. Barely hanging on to the hope of a better tomorrow, she leaves and she returns like a dog to its vomit. Over and over I promise, but never really get it right. I find that I am at war with God. I am at war with life. I am become the destroyer of my dreams, my hopes, my love. I pretend surrender, but never bow my knee, never really break, never really stop. How did I not see that the casualty of my war was a spark of hope in her eyes, the wrinkle in her nose? I watch as she stirs in sleep, and I imagine I was blind to all the destruction around me and the lives of those I loved most, until the day God opened my eyes. I remember her pregnant for the first time. Should have been so different than it was. Was the birth of our child to be the redemption of our marriage? Not directly, but it is a street sign in my memory that marks the beginning of the end. Or maybe it was the end of the beginning. My colonel called me into a special meeting. I remember the air charged with feeling that something profound was about to happen, like static electricity, sparks of something that feels like creation. Surrounded by men I did not know, he told me the wages of sin is death. His exact words were, "Son, we know that this disease does not only affect homosexual men and IV drug abusers. If you need anyone to talk to, the chaplain is standing by. You have HIV." Stunned, I walked from that room all the way to our single-wide mobile home in Midway Park, North Carolina. How do you tell your pregnant wife you have HIV? What are the appropriate words? Should I stand or sit, hold her hand or stand apart? Are there rules for destroying someone's life? This radiant woman sleeps beside me now, no sign of the pain of that day on her face. Peace lies next to me, and that is a comfort. Do you want the good news or the bad news? This cliche is my opener. I had a long walk to think about it, and in the end, it was all I had. She does what she always does, with a wrinkle on her nose and a spark of hope in her eyes. She says, "Tell me the good news." "I'm going to be home when the baby's born," I told her. "Well, what's the bad news?" she says. "I have HIV." I still feel the static of the moment, and to this day, it's the most horrible sight I have ever witnessed. I was completely unprepared. First, the spark left her eye, then the wrinkle her nose. She hung her head and let out a trembling sigh. A woman that has been disappointed over and over and to the point of death. "I don't want my husband to die," was all she said. "Let there be light," was all the twisted man's heart heard. So I knelt, I surrendered, I died. So tonight I brush a hair from her face as she sleeps 32 years of marriage to the twisted man, and I remember. Although the days may be long sometimes, nights are longer. I wrote that essay to describe the path I took in my life. The sin in my life had committed my wife and unborn child to the possibility of death. And the idea that someone else was going to die for my sin really upset me. The night I told her of my unfaithfulness and of the disease that I had contracted, when she spoke words of grace, she doesn't really even remember, when she said, "I don't want my husband to die." I heard all those Sunday school stories coming back, all the things I grew up as a child learning, the idea that Jesus Christ had died for me. We had, during that time, gone to a little church. One of the deals my wife made with me, she decided we were going to try to work things out, even though all of this had happened. I had been an unfaithful man, and cheated on my wife, and brought home a disease. She said one of the ways that we were going to work things out was we were going to get me to church. So she brought me to this little Southern Baptist church in the middle of Midway Park, North Carolina, just outside of Jacksonville. And I sat there and listened to the preacher talk on Hebrews chapter 6. And he was talking about people trampling through the blood of Jesus Christ like it didn't matter. And I realized that that was me. So in that pew, in that little church, I lifted my eyes to heaven and I told God I would be his man, whatever life there was left. We went to training, and we went to a hospital in Virginia, and they continued their testing with HIV to decide what they were going to do. And my wife was nearing day by day closer to the birth of our son. And I watched the Marines and sailors around me who had all tested positive for HIV die. I watched them get sick, get pneumonia. Then they weren't coming to the meetings anymore. Then they would announce another one had perished. It was 1987? In the middle of the beginning, maybe of the middle of the beginning of the HIV/AIDS crisis in the 80s. So for a year I went there and came home. The baby, our son, was born in a hospital room full of astronauts. They were wearing those suits. Now, since COVID's going on, we know what those suits look like. And my son was born. He didn't feel the touch of human hands until he had been tested for HIV. He was negative, and so far my wife was negative. But in the early days of AIDS, they would tell us that the virus can sit in you dormant for 7 years, so it wasn't a lot of hope. But I remember bowing my knees in front of a horrible couch in a single-wide trailer that we lived in Midway Park, North Carolina, just outside of base. And I bowed the knees and told God, I surrender. You can have whatever's left. I pretty much ruined all of this. My son stayed healthy, and so far my wife stayed healthy, and I hadn't progressed any further in the disease. I finally asked the doctors where I was going in Virginia. I asked the doctors if they would do more tests. All my tests had come back positive that they had done, but I asked if they would do it again, and they had a marker come back weird. Something was different. I could tell something wasn't right about the test. And so I asked them to do one more set, and they said they would. So they did that. And at home, I was watching my wife just little by little die. We were having a lot of problems, obviously, trying to put our marriage back together in the early days. And so she was running out of hope. Anyway, never really heard nothing back from the hospital. They were getting ready to check me out of the Marine Corps. You didn't get to stay in if you were diagnosed with this disease. And so I was waiting all the paperwork. My wife, she had a dream. My wife had lots of dreams, and I think God has spoken to her in the past through her dreams. She had a dream, and she was at a grave side, and there was a gravestone with my name on it and a gravestone with the baby's name on it. And she was sick, lying next to the grave, and she woke up and she told God, I don't think I can do this anymore. And the Lord gave her a verse, 1 Corinthians 10:13, that talks about no temptation has overtaken you except such as is common to man. But with this temptation, with this trial, God will give you a way of escape that you might be able to bear it. And so she got up from the table, walked out, and in the mail there was a letter, and that letter was from the Marine Corps. Marine Corps does things like this. They said, we don't really understand what has happened or what's taken place, but on this date, your husband tested positive for HIV, and on this date, nearly a year later, he has tested negative. We're not going to throw him out of the Marine Corps. He can return to his unit and have a nice day. Somewhere in all our letters, we still have that. That was the beginning of hope for our family. Now, whether God healed me or not, I can't definitively say. I can just tell you my story. And in my story, I had HIV, and a year later, I didn't have HIV. God healed my marriage. Took about 5 years, hard work, but we were able to overcome my unfaithfulness and adultery. We gave birth, my wife gave birth to 3 boys. JC was my firstborn. He was the one born there. My second son, Cole, and our third son, Joseph, who is autistic, all healthy. I entered into ministry about 25 years ago. The event happened probably 30 plus years ago. And all the while, you know, I guess I saw God take a man who was broken and allow him to have a story of redemption where God redeems the things we've broke in others and we broke in our own life. So I pastor the First Church of the Broken, Calvary Chapel, Buell, in Buell, Idaho. And God has been redeeming my story ever since. I guess my point of sharing this with you is if you are out there somewhere and you're broken, and you understand your brokenness, and maybe you look behind and there's just a wake of destruction behind you. Maybe it's similar to my story, maybe it's totally different, but the God who put my pieces back together can put yours back together too. So we gather on this channel and we share these little videos in hope that the stories will resonate with others and that they'll lift their eyes to the heavens and know where their help comes from. For our help comes from you, Lord, maker of heaven and earth. He's the one who's able to deliver. This is not a story of healing. It's a story of how God saved me. That he reached into my life and began to change me from the inside out. The healing, the things that God did in my physical life and in my marriage are secondary to what God did spiritually in me. Somehow on that day, God knew exactly what I needed to hear that would cause me to look to him and say, I need this grace in my life. In the early days, I was always amazed that God could love someone like me. Just like I'm amazed that my wife could love someone like me. But I guess the point of the story is there's nothing and no one that God can't redeem. The Bible commands us this: repent and believe. Put our trust in Jesus Christ, and you watch. No one can put the pieces of the broken back together like Jesus Christ. God bless you guys. Have a blessed day. Hey, if any of you are interested in contacting me, asking questions, let me give you my email address. My email address is Jackie@CalvaryChapelBuell, which is BUHL.com. Hopefully it will be linked below. And you guys can send me emails, ask me questions. Feel free to comment on the videos. God bless.